Hello and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Well, this week we're going to be taking a look at something that is being talked about. It is a very serious issue, and we've got our inspiration from Netflix. Well, where else today on social media that really rules? I'm talking about the film Adolescents. Issues that pertain to, I think, every society, every household, no matter where you are in the globe. We're talking about parenting. We're talking about what kids do in school, what kids do at home behind closed doors when parents think all they're doing is surfing the net. But you have to be careful as to what they're surfing. What are the attitudes that are coming into the heads? Parenting is no more just about, parent and, figuring out where the child is doing physically. It's also what the child is thinking, is what is on his mind. It's what his peers and colleagues are talking about. They're talking a language we don't understand. You look at their social media posts and you think everything is all great. But hey, every comment, every emoji now has a different meaning that perhaps our generation, the parents, may not be able to understand. There is mansplaining, there is a manosphere, there is, bullying going on at school to a different level. Always there was that, even in boarding schools, those of us who've gone there. But this is a different level. They're playing with your mind. So at the end of the day, what do parents do? What world are the children living in? And also, is there a gender equation here? Are boys getting ideas different from girls? What is happening to the upbringing, and how do we deal with it as a society as a whole? So I have joining me on the show KAVEREE BAMZAI. She's the first woman editor of India Today. She's an author, film critic, and she's someone who's written a lot on both society and gender issues. I have with me AMBIKA Singh. She is a child and adolescent psychotherapist. She works with Family Tree. But first, KAVEREE, I'll begin with you. On this film, you've seen the film. What are the larger messages and the issues that it raises?
Yeah. It's a four-part series actually. That makes it even more intense. It's a four-part series, each episode shot in one take. So you really feel cinematically, you feel as if you're right there with the parents and with the children in their classrooms, in their bedrooms, inside their minds virtually. So I think in terms of technique, it's been done in such a way that you feel the pressure and you feel the issues very, very strongly. But more than that, Priya, I think, I agree with all the points that you raised. I think at the end of the day, what it is, it's the series is about pain and it's about suffering. And these are things that the West is really grappling with because there's a rationale for everything. If your children turn out to be monsters like the Menendez brothers, there was another recent series. There's a history of child abuse, there's a history of toxic behavior by the parents. Here, the parents are perfectly decent folk, and they have raised a daughter who's perfectly decent and perfectly fine as well. So they cannot understand what has happened to make this teenager, this young boy, 13-year-old, what has happened to make him snap to do such a horrendous thing, to murder a classmate. So I think that idea that suffering can come to you no matter what. It's a very Eastern idea, like Buddhism. I mean, life is about suffering, and the only way through it is to go through it. So I think that's why it's caught the imagination of not just the West, but the world. I think the idea that pain, and there's another really brilliant series going on right now, which is White Lotus, which is
Yes.
also talking about the whole idea of pain and suffering and how you cannot outrun it. So I think that's why it's caught the imagination. That's why, as parents, we identify with it because sometimes we just cannot understand why does your child turn out to be the way he or she is. And if you have another child, he seems perfectly normal, as normal is defined in society today. Why is that? And that is this karmic thing about adolescence, that there's no rationale. You know, it's the only rationale is society out there, and how vigilant can you be? How much of hypervigilance can you show? It's your peer group, your teachers. Your teachers don't understand, they're the same generation as the parents, or maybe a little younger. The peer group is exactly like your child, also grappling with issues that they don't understand. So I think that's the reason why it really has got everybody talking. And I also found it so intense, and it's heartbreaking, you know.
So we also have joining with us Namita Bhandare. She is a writer on gender and social issues. She has a column also called Mind the Gap. Namita, you've seen the movie Adolescence. What do you make of it? We're talking about the ripple effect and also the fact, is it a mirror to society and parenting? Is it a cause for concern?
Well, I think the fact that it has had this massive ripple throughout the world tells you something. You know, they're discussing it in British Parliament. The UK Prime Minister is talking about why every school needs to show it. It has great resonance in India. Where why should a crime procedural, in a sense, have this kind of resonance all over the world? Today New York Times has a long article, so it's obviously it has touched a chord. And it's coming at a time where kids are, and adults, I'm sorry to say, but kids are learning from adults. We are completely addicted to our phones. Whether we are out for dinner, whether we are at home, the photograph, we've gone beyond the photographing of the meal. And we need to consider why a country like Australia, for instance, has banned social media for those under 16. And nobody is in favor of banning, but maybe we need to think about something drastic, because this is, I mean, it's a scary serial. I was hearing what Kaveri was saying. I mean, it's a fact. You don't know what your kids are up to. And, no spoiler alerts over here, but in the last episode that focuses on the parents, the mother says, we thought he was safe at home in his room. And all parents, what can be safer than the own house?
Yeah.
And your child is very emphatically not safe in their own house, because you don't know what they are watching, not just on their computers, but now even on their phones, which they're holding in their hands all the time. There's a language that we don't know about. There are emojis that we don't know about. There's a difference between a yellow heart and a pink heart. Who would have thought? We don't even know this. We don't speak the language. And it is a wake up call. And I think we'd be foolish not to heed it.
So, Ambika, you are there on the ground. You are dealing with the kids. What are the issues that parents are coming with? And is the film maybe a wake up call for the rest of us? But you didn't seem to face, because you are already dealing with situations like this. What does parenting today look like?
I mean, this concern about social media, I think, has been there for a very long time. And parents that come to us with their young people and their children, we have noticed as a team that social media and the impact has been a ticking time bomb. So for us, for example, when I watched the series, it wasn't news. But what I liked about it was that it's not answering the why. There's nothing specifically wrong with the parents. There's nothing major happening in school. So usually when we look at, let's say, homicide or suicide, the first thought that comes is, why did this happen and what can we change? But this is a systemic issue. And what the series does well is point out precisely that as a society and as a system, there are lots of things that are not happening that are resulting in situations like these. For example, language has completely changed. So the idea of what the young person or the child can have access to online, I think as adults, we need to be far more curious about what exactly does that look like. Because even I didn't know about these emojis meaning different things, but how much are we talking to adolescents these days and asking and be curious about what is your world looking like? How are you making sense of it? So actually, I'm really glad, we're all really glad that people are talking about it now, but on the ground, this has been happening for a really long time, where there's a shutout between the parental generation and the child because they don't know how to communicate with each other. Parents have their own priorities of what they require the young person to do, but young people today have a totally different worldview. They have two worlds, the real world and the internet. So how to bridge that gap is something really important to think about together.
So that's the issue, Kaveri, really. Also what is happening in schools, what the peer pressure is, the social media pressure, the peer pressure. I mean, going beyond the movie also, Kaveri, we have kids living life through filters, really. They have to live their lives according to a certain norm that is not being set by the parents, but by their own classmates.
Priya, what is the most remarkable thing about adolescence is that it tells you that the virtual world is far more real for children than the real world.
Good
And I
point.
think that is so deeply disturbing. And for parents who come from, most of them still from an analog generation, who are able to understand that, yes, this is this was the world before digital and this is the world post digital. This is something that is very difficult to understand because this is a generation that was born with a smartphone literally in their hands, and when you look at schools in India, for instance, they have this policy of not allowing the phone in the classroom, and yet a lot of the learning can come from smartphones, from smart screens. uh, you have a similar situation as they show. The classroom in adolescence is very interesting, you have a situation where most kids have their smartphones in their hands, even though the teachers keep telling them, put that phone away, put that. So they have accepted that the smartphone is part of their reality, which in India, I think a lot of schools still haven't come to that point, which I don't know, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Because at least you're acknowledging that the smartphone is part of these kids' reality. This is their world. Now, at least you have to find the tools to negotiate with that and to understand. And, the teacher saying incel, what does it mean? I don't even know. Or you have this remarkable scene, which I found so profoundly moving, where a young boy is explaining to his father, who's the investigator,
Yes.
that you're embarrassing me because you don't know what is going on here. And this is what this emoji means. This is what, so you're completely on the wrong track. And the father looks so abashed. So you have a generation where um, they actually do not understand each other because they live in different worlds. You have a generation, the parental generation, which understands the difference between real and virtual, and the children who perhaps have blurred that distinction. So I think that is very significant. The other thing I found very interesting about it, Priya, was that it shows you the reality. When a tragedy happens, you don't look at how it affects the entire family. You usually think, okay, this is a murder, this child has done this, or this child is addicted to this, or whatever. You don't think of the impact it has on the child, on the family, on the parents, and what it
Hmm.
does to them, on the sibling. That is such a profound thing again here, and it's very moving. And for anyone who has ever had a troubled child, it is again, I'm sorry to use that word again, but it's heartbreaking. So I think that again is a very profound thing about adolescence.
Yeah, and also, what I found is that trouble child now today you don't know how to spot the trouble child because
Yeah.
the child is fine. He's going to his room. You thought he's gone to sleep. He's not acting out in the words. He may be, but what he says, I found the scenes in the school, as even Kaveri spoke about Namita, the most revealing because that's really where we don't understand the language. We don't understand the mindset where he sees there's a new, a picture of one of the girls
Yeah.
with the rounds and he thinks she's vulnerable. This is the time to ask her out. So the manosphere, should we then address this at the school level, start teaching? I mean, I don't know what is the remedy,
I
Ramit?
think, Sam, thank you for bringing that up because I wonder how many parents have actually listened or watched Andrew Tate. I have not because I just
Yeah.
find the concept so repulsive.
And he's a toxic hero of the social media
I
world.
don't even know if it's a
Absolutely.
coincidence, but Spotify recently has taken off one of his shows called Pimping Hose, which tells you everything you need to know about that show. But he's still there. He's still on Spotify. He's still, and we don't even know what he's telling. He is brainwashing a whole generation. He has 10 million followers on Twitter or X or whatever it is that Elon Musk calls it. And he was, in fact, banned from Twitter when it was Twitter and brought back by Elon Musk. And
No
because
surprises.
free speech. So I think I was thinking this morning when I was reading the papers, there's a wonderful, the budget is just out. The Delhi government budget is just out, and a very wonderful, heartening bit of news about how much they're spending on education. And I'm thinking to myself that, you have happiness curriculum, yeah, in Delhi government schools. Why can't we have a curriculum on talking to young people from class 1 to 12? You can call it gender equity, you can call it Nari Shakti, you can give it whatever name you want to give it. But, I think and I think most of us as parents, we are really out of our depth And I thank God that my kids did not grow up at a time of such intense social media, because, it's very difficult to compete with peer pressure, with what they're listening to, with outside influences. So maybe we need to look at an institutional response. First, we need to understand the problem. Andrew Tate is not out there in a global world. He's in there. He is in your son's bedroom. He's in your daughter's bedroom. He's teaching them something. We don't even know what he's teaching. I can bet you none of our MPs have ever heard any Tandu and I have not either. So we need to recognize that there's a problem and we need to tackle it on an institutional level. You can't leave it to, so Sequin recently, which is an NGO, had a very wonderful program and they're launching this thing called Mardo Wali Baat, where they're saying we have to talk to young boys. You can't ignore, we are only focusing on, when we talk of gender rights, we only look at the women. Participation in parliament, crimes against women, menstrual health. Who's talking to the boys? You can't ignore one half of, so you need to talk to the boys. You need to know what they're learning on social media, in school, from their peers. Can there be an alternative narrative? And it has to be done by government. It can't be left to a couple of good-hearted, well-intentioned NGOs. They just don't have the capacity to do it.
But Ambika, do you agree with that? We need to do something systemically and, get the boys in the conversation also, because end of the day, it's okay to talk about women, what we are going through, but it's, bring in the boys also. What are the boys of today thinking? What are, the attitudes that you see when you talk to the kids?
Absolutely, we have to bring the boys into the narrative as well, but there has to be a systemic response. But to make it more specific to, let's say, what you do at home, how curious are you about what's happening in the young person's mind? Like, for example, just bringing up a conversation with them. Like, if you see and this is a spoiler, but episode 3, where the therapist is interacting with the young person, she's curious about his understanding of what's going on in his mind. That's the question. Because how are you perceiving these things? What do they mean to you as a 13-year-old? Is a very important question to ask, because 13-year-olds do not have full brain capacity. Till the age of 25, your cerebral cortex is still developing. So decision-making, executive function is still developing till the age of 25. That's why she also asks, do you understand what this means? Like what this event has done? And the young person isn't fully sure. So if we don't understand or try and engage with what's happening with them or listen to that, we're going to go at this with what we think should be done as opposed to what would be helpful to them. So there is a systemic response that most certainly needs to be there, but we also need to try and bridge that gap of what their world looks like by understanding it from them, because we don't know what it means. How we make sense of the world is very different from how young people do that today, because their world is really different. And the only way to bridge that is actually to listen first to them. How are you making sense of the world? What does this mean to you? Why this phrasing and not that? And I think those questions and those conversations need to start happening also at home.
Okay, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to pick up on the point that Ambika has raised on the conversations we need to have with our kids just after a quick break. Hello and welcome back to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. We are taking a look at the spin-off from the movie Adolescents and the kind of messaging it sends right into our homes and our children's bedrooms. But Kaveri, I have a question for you. The conversation, yes, a systemic response is needed. But let's take this particular movie. Would you recommend that a parent watch it with their kids, with their 13-year-old kids, so their children also understand? Or would you say this is a movie parents need to watch alone, don't expose the kids to it? How would you recommend it?
Difficult question, Priya, but I think I would recommend that parents watch it with their children, because often we also have this idea of our children as, people who can do no wrong, who are sort of, as much as parents are put on a pedestal, the parents also tend to put the children on a pedestal. And I think what this shows you is how manipulative children can be. And they can, they can play on your weaknesses. They know what your strengths are. They can actually, make you take decisions that you don't realize that you're doing because of their pressure. There's again, spoiler alert, but there's this again really powerful scene at the end where the family is just out there, just wants to have one happy day in their lives, one happy day after a whole lot of miserable days. And the child chooses to talk about pleading not guilty that very day. And it again breaks their hearts. And I think we have to be very mindful that our children are capable of this kind of behavior. How do we deal with that? So it's not just a question of the Andrew Tates out there. These are also children who are developing these skills of being an adult in a world that we will not recognize, perhaps.
Hmm.
The next 5 to 10 years, what is the world and what is society going to be like? I don't think we can even comprehend. So these children are developing these skills to face that world. We don't even have an idea of what these skills are. So they're developing these skills of manipulating your mind, of sort of focusing on your weaknesses, hyper competitiveness about who's more masculine, or who is better placed with girls. With girls, it's the same thing. Who can
Who's
attract
more
more
liked?
boys,
I mean, they're very
more
concerned
likes,
with who's more liked.
exactly, and what kind of likes. So there's so much that's going on. And I think here is where the family needs to be supported. And I think what Namita was talking about, institutional support, you need to support the family. And in India, we do have some institutions like NIMHANS or AIMS or whatever, but I think we don't know enough about them. There are public sector institutions which can help families. There are lots of NGOs as well, but we don't know enough about them. I think we need to socialize these ideas that it's okay as a family to seek therapy, it's okay as a family to look for help from the system. And then, you know, and then understand that the system also has to grow with you. So these are all things that are very much evolving, I think. The family as a unit is evolving, the response of the state and the society is evolving. All of this is changing.
But a spin-off from what Kaveri said, Namita, is the children have, they're manipulative. My concern is if they're being manipulative, I would still say that means they are adhering to the same moral code of conduct as us. I think the boy thought that he's not doing anything wrong. He's surprised. He's saying, Ek to I'm asking her out when she's at a vulnerable point and she's rejecting me. So their morality is a whole, which is even more worrying because their morality levels are different. They live in a different moral sphere.
See,
Namita?
I actually, for me, that was the redemption. When this boy at the end, and I'm continuing with spoiler alerts because you better have seen
I'll put that on
by now.
our.
Yes. So for me, taking responsibility for what he has and telling his parents that he's going to change his plea is heartbreaking for the parents. But for me, that was the moment where he redeems himself because he has the moral spine and the strength to say, I did a wrong thing and
Namita,
I'm going
on
to.
one day that they were trying to celebrate a birthday.
The timing was wrong, but
Yeah.
he for me that was redemption. The fact that he had done
I
it.
call it the emperor syndrome, right? You need to be the focus of attention all the time. That's
But
just an
he's
aside.
doing the right
Yeah.
thing. Let's face it, he's doing the right thing by
Is
changing.
he doing the right thing? I didn't think I think he's doing the more convenient thing. Trial is starting. Who's going to be bothered about the trial?
No, why? You can plead. It's I don't know what the British laws are, but I'm sure that there are very serious consequences, and they have not found the weapon. There are many things in his favor without getting into. We can only speculate, but.
Correct.
Taking a stand, a boy who keeps telling his father and he keeps telling the system, I did nothing wrong, I haven't done anything wrong, to then understand right at the end. We have not seen that because what you see in episode 3 is actually manipulation. That from this very vulnerable boy who likes hot chocolate with marshmallows, he's towering. That visual is, my God, it's so powerful. This 13-year-old, and this woman is scared. She's scared, and he knows she's scared because he says, you've turned red. And then when he leaves the room, she just breaks down, because it is scary for her as an adult to see this 13-year-old who can manipulate her. And then, so without getting, because, we are talking about something larger than just the plot of adolescence. So I just wanted to just also clarify to Ambika. I was not saying that we should all wash our hands off and leave it to government. Not at all. I am saying we all need to work together, whether it is institutions, as Kaveri mentioned, NIMHANS and AIMS, and for mental health, but those are the institutions, or whether you need to a parent alone cannot. We're not private schooling our kids, no. So kids go to school, and so I felt why that's where I brought in the government, because I think the education ministry, or you want to call it even Ministry of Women and Children, I've been talking about this for a long time, that, this whole notion of consent, this notion of respecting, a woman's choice, that has to be tackled. We say sex education and everybody just sees red, as if, we are, I think we're kind of missing the issues. We get so enraged about a comic stand-up comedian, and we're all like, arrest him, do this, do that, vandalize the place. But what is the actual real danger of what your children are being exposed to in a globalized world? We do not know. We're not even beginning that conversation. We haven't started it. As I said, there are some. I met a wonderful man. I must, small tangent over here. So he lives in Gorakhpur, Eastern UP. His name is Manish, one single.
Yogi Adityanath.
No. And he has, listen, he has a NGO called Gali Band Abhiyan. He has one focus, and he says, and he's been doing this since 2005, okay, before social media, before all of this. His simple premise is that all galis, especially in Hindi and in Eastern UP, they're all to do with ma and behen and female body parts. He says, I want to stop that. So he goes to schools and he talks to boys that stop, this doesn't make you macho. This just makes you an ass. And he has spoken to 40,000 students since 2005. And it's simple. This is how social change happens. So, there are these little, but I'm just saying that they're too small. And the problem is too big for one Gali Band Abhiyan or one Sequin or one NIMHANS. NIMHANS, of course, comes in for firefighting. I'm not talking about firefighting. I'm talking about everyday teaching your children. If you can teach them happiness, you please teach them also the, not dangers of social media. You'll have to call it. What makes you masculine? What is masculinity? What does it mean to be masculine in contemporary India?
Good point. That's the point, Ambika, I want to take to you. What do kids think today? The idea of being masculine and, in terms of toxicity, the boys that you deal with, do you see such mindsets as we saw, or are they very carefully hidden?
That's the thing, because the age group that I work with, it's not, you can't really quickly say it's masculine or toxic, because young people learn from observation. So if you even notice in that episode, she's asking about how do men in your house behave? What have you noticed? Who gets angry? So there's also a lot of modeling that impacts how young people or children interact with the world around them. So I wouldn't very quickly go toxic and masculine, because their mind development is still taking place. These are big adult words that we're using as we try and make sense of a young person's experience. But the accountability of how we conduct ourselves is actually on the adults. So how regulated are men in their interaction with the women in the house? Or how regulated is the school when it's interacting with the young person? So I think more than just the happiness quotient that is looked at in schooling, for example, we really need to look at how to pay attention to emotions that rise in your body. Because actually when you yell, that's not a sign of anger. Anger physiologically feels very different, but we don't teach that in schools. We teach these concepts of happy and angry or sad or bad, and morality as big concepts. But physiologically, how do you understand what's happening in your body so that you can respond more effectively is not something any school is talking about. So we have these outbursts that happen, and then we go into firefight. But we're not teaching children, and I don't even think adults really know how to regulate themselves. So how do we pay attention to what's happening within us and then take that as information? I think is an important thing to start talking about as well, so that mental health is not just when there's a diagnosis or there's a crisis. It's an everyday thing. Your mental health goes with you wherever you go. Your capacity to interact with your world is determined by your mental health. So that adaptability and how to attend to yourself needs to also be worked into the systems. And that's what I'm saying. It's a systemic thing on multiple levels, on how to interact with ourselves internally. Yeah.
Yeah, so first understand yourself, understand your kids, and I think this is something from the household to the schools to the system. It has to be a
Yeah.
concerted effort from everyone. It's a movie that has sent a lot of powerful messages to something that is happening within our homes, and I think it's worth talking about, even though we let out a lot of spoiler alerts over here. But I think it's been it's a very enlightening conversation, and thank you all for being here. Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.